Hey, what up, boxing fans? This is the Rope a Dope Report. I'm your host, Chris Carlson. I'm back with another upload live stream here. And this one pertains to the Manny Pacquiao Jessie Vargas fight. I've been busy of late, haven't been able to do a video for this one. And plus, I got to admit, I'm not necessarily anticipating this one per se, right? Um, Jessie Vargas is, good fighter, solid fighter, and he's definitely made some improvements in the last whatever year or two, last couple of fights. But obviously the anticipation is not necessarily too high right now. Hopefully, for the ones that are going to, spend their money, either they're a hardcore Pacquiao fan or Vargas fan or whatever. Hopefully we do get an action-packed main event and in a good card, obviously too. Nonito Donaire against Jesse Magdanello. That's an interesting fight on the undercard. I'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But anyway, you can't help to think that this isn't a bridge to Floyd Mayweather, right? Timothy Bradley earlier this year was an opponent for the third time for Manny Pacquiao. Now, Bradley, a solid guy, right? Solid fighter, but nobody really wanted to see it because they had already seen two fights. I can't really rip the fight because Bradley's still a solid welterweight, and you could make an argument that he could hang with any of these younger, coming into their prime lightweights, welterweights. But it's just one of those things that a lot of people didn't buy it because been there, done that, right? Probably only the hardcore Pacquiao fans bought that one. But anyway, a lot has been made about Manny Pacquiao's schedule as a senator. He basically had the shortest retirement ever. No one really truly believed that. And when you look at, I kind of say, well, I didn't really need to see that Bradley fight, but in that fight, he did look good. Manny Pacquiao did. It seemed like some of that speed and explosiveness and just a little bit more of that punch rate returned some. Now, I'm not going to say it's, back in his prime and his heyday, especially that run in 08 and 09, 010, but he did look a bit rejuvenated, I guess you could say. So it is tough to quit if you still got the skills, and we know he needs the money, right? I mean, being a politician, you need money to win races. He's definitely charitable. He also has a huge living expense, with the people around him. He has, when he travels with a lot of people. So it's easy for me to say, well, why don't you just give up when he's actually still in form and could probably beat most of the welterweights, or a lot of them anyway. So I can understand that, but I can't help to think that this fight isn't a bridge to the Floyd Mayweather rematch. You know what I mean? He would have beaten Bradley. He would have been beaten, if he beats Vargas anyway, in prime, solid welterweight, coming off his best performance. And, with the rumors surfacing, or actually, I should say the news, it's not rumors. Floyd Mayweather did spar not long ago. Now, whether that's just him helping out a fighter, which it didn't sound like that was the case, you just can't help to think about it. Sure, a lot of people thought it was a dud and it was like a non-fight. Some people called it a sparring session. I definitely wouldn't go that long or go that far, but I can understand the hype surrounded it. But what did it get? I think it ended at 4.6 or 4.5 pay-per-view buys. So even if it does 2 million, 2.5, it still is a ton of money, right? So there is money to be had at the gate overseas, especially if you're talking 2.5 years later. They can sell the Manny Pacquiao shoulder injury. I mean, you may not want to see it, but there is still money to be had. And a lot of people are, it's not really Jessie Vargas in this fight. It's for Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. A lot of people are just kind of happy, especially, early on last year or later last year and early on this year when Pacquiao was saying it was his last fight and Floyd said he's retired. And a lot of people just want to see them go out. And if they do come back, they only want to see them in big fights. Their temperament now and their patience for a pay-per-view with Jessie Vargas 2 weeks before another pay-per-view in a year of not really good pay-per-views, my guess is it's probably not going to do that good. But anyway, on to the fight. Like I said, much has been made about the schedule as a senator that Manny Pacquiao holds. We know he gets up really early to run, to get his road work in, then works a full day, and then does his boxing training at night, sometimes starting at 5 or 7 or whatever. So there's two ways in my mind to look at that. Either he's going to be worn out mentally and physically, or he's going to be sharp and focused because he has little boxes, little categories where throughout the day he can just turn on a focus for that and then shut down, get away from politics and go to a thing he loves. Some people need to be busy all day. And so to me, based off how he looked on the scale, what he weighing at, like 144 something, he looks in shape. He looks very much in shape, right? And I definitely could see him going to 140 next if that Floyd Mayweather fight doesn't happen. Jessie Vargas 2 summers ago fought Timothy Bradley. Obviously, the last 10 seconds of that fight, we will never know what would have happened, right? Clearly, Timothy Bradley was hurt by Jessie. And when the bell hit for the 10-second, the ref called it off as if the fight was over. He kind of, broke him up. Now, Jessie thought he had won because, he had seen the ref come in. But so I'm not going to sit here and say, you literally can never know. You can never know what would have happened in that 10 seconds. So did he get screwed because he had a guy hurt, and time on the clock? Yes, he did. However, the flip side of that is Timothy Bradley has been hurt late in a fight, like the Provodnikov fight, and took a knee, being smart, and that's something he could have done here. So I don't say that he got robbed fully because, we can't just say, oh, he would have knocked him out, but we don't know. We don't know what, what would have happened. But in his last fight, he was a slight underdog against an unbeaten guy in Saddam Ali, and he looked great. It was his best performance. On the way up, you could see Jessie was just a very fundamentally sound guy. He's got a good jab, good reach, great right, solid right hand. I should say not yet. He didn't have that right hand that he has right now, but his left hook actually was more of the power punch for him. And this is kind of on the way up. And his career that Jose Cito Lopez fight, he won, but it was a very tight fight. He kind of moved laterally and didn't do a whole lot and then started building his way back up. And like I said, he peaked in his last fight. I'm not saying he's peaked and he's done, but that was his best performance. He knocked out Ali. And like I said, the right hand in the last year or two has definitely improved. Him and Dewey Cooper, his new trainer, have definitely clicked. And so he's coming into this about as good as he can, I'd say, for Jessie Vargas, right? The thing is, though, he's not a counterpuncher, right? Now, that's not to say he can't set traps and he's not he doesn't think through punches where they're going to land and when, and he doesn't have timing or nothing like that. But he's not really known as a counterpuncher, right? He's got a really good jab, like I mentioned. He could use that length and that reach. Is that something that he's going to employ and try to stay on the outside? We know a jab right hand can be very effective at times anyway against a southpaw. Manny Pacquiao obviously is a little bit different of a southpaw when he's on his game. When he's using those angles and he's in and out with that quick footwork and that hand speed and that power on those punches, it can be very hard to handle. as we've seen, time and time again. You can look at Marquez and how he counterpunched Manny throughout those fights, but Jessie and him, they're just not the same fighters. You know what I mean? Jessie may do something different or better in his prime right now than an older Marquez later in some of those fights. So, and this is a better weight class, I would say, for Jessie than it was Marquez, but you can't really put those guys together. Even Floyd Mayweather kept catching him with the left hand on the way in and was just limiting his attack. And we know that Pacquiao is a lot of things. Obviously, a first ballot Hall of Famer, great hand speed, all that, right? But he doesn't cut the ring off per se. I mean, he can cut the ring off to an extent. Some of these guys that he's fought, the style when he's right in front of you, that's different. He doesn't need to cut the ring off. But some of these, it's just tough. He's not necessarily a guy that cuts the ring off. Usually he stuns you with a punch, and then you're on the ropes. That's how he gets you on the ropes. He doesn't necessarily cut the ring off per se. So maybe I think that's probably Jesse's best chance. You know what I mean? Use that jab, use that range, obviously tie up when he gets close. And I would say left hook off of that jab once you've managed to land that jab. So I see Jessie Vargas having success landing clean punches early in the fight. Many solid guys have, and obviously elite level guys have with Manny, because he's not necessarily the most defensive sound fighter, right? But he's not just throwing left hands like he used to back in the day. He does, set up stuff a little bit better, and that right hook has come along, no doubt about it. He's used the right hand a lot more in the last, handful of years, that's for sure. But for me, I could see the first 3-4 rounds, maybe even 5-6, I don't know. But I say Jessie will have success. I do see that. But like many that have some success, at some point, Pacquiao is going to land something powerful, right? Something explosive. And if he follows it up like he had during the Bradley fight, and not, in some of these other fights that we've seen in the last couple of years where he doesn't have that same energy, that same work rate, that same combinations, 3, 4, 5 punch combinations, and getting in and out and using that footwork and just being, a mad dog in there, If we don't see that, obviously that's going to be an issue. But if the same Manny Pacquiao that showed up against Timothy Bradley, if it's that same guy, which I anticipate it to be, I think it's a fairly easy win for Manny Pacquiao. And I don't say easy, like I said, I think easy like he's just going to whitewash him. Even if he wins 10-2, let's say, or 9-3, right? I still think within the rounds, especially in the first half of the fight, within the rounds, Jessie can win rounds, but he also make him work within the round. But as you get into the mid and late, especially rounds, I think once he reaches that point where he gets stunned or buzzed by a Pacquiao flurry or a big punch followed by a flurry, and he may get into like earmuff mode, which we see a lot with Manny, I think the fight will play out how Jessie Vargas wants to fight it. Does he exchange back and try to still, even if he gets knocked down in those exchanges, does he still try to land a big right hand because he's down on the scorecards? Or does he go into survival mode and just try to last the rest of the fight? Because sometimes, like I said, with those flurries, it's tough to get your offense off. And obviously, like I mentioned, the jab, right hand, left hook, especially the right hand, they can all be very effective for Jessie. But the key thing is setting them up. Like I said, the jab, the left hook off the jab, or just timing. You got to really think it through. It's easy for me to say that, though, when Manny Pacquiao's on his game. So, I think it could be an entertaining style matchup, I think there's a potential for that, no doubt. But for me, I have Manny Pacquiao winning by a unanimous decision, something like a 9-3, but competitive where he makes him earn it. You know what I mean? I think Jesse can make him earn it, but we'll see how much the improvement. And back to that Timothy Bradley fight, although Manny and Bradley, they fight differently, just like I said, Marquez and and Vargas. But being, as a top flight fighter that Bradley is, you could see for most of that fight, yes, he landed the right hand. Yes, he landed, solid throughout the fight. But you could see that Bradley was a higher level than Vargas in that fight, in my opinion. And I think that you can't use the triangle, fighter A, fighter B, fighter C, but you can look at levels. And to me, it didn't seem like he was on the same level as Bradley. And we know Bradley is not in his prime, just like Manny Pacquiao. He has faded some. So I have it a clear win. And then we start to hear the rumors. Will Pacquiao fight Crawford? Will he fight Floyd? I don't know. I'm not really sure. It'll be interesting to see. Bob Arum's talking about trying to move Lomachenko up if he beats Walters, obviously. That's not going to be an easy fight either. But Bob Arum's talking about a catch weight, But Bob Arum's he's going to say what's right at the time, no matter what. Because remember, the reason why the Crawford fight, there was a couple of reasons why. Freddie said, well, as a senator, in this new responsibility, this full-time job now, I want to see how this camp goes, and then I'll fight a Crawford. There's also been, the stylistic part of that, being that Freddie Roach just fought him against Postol, and he said, well, that would be a boring fight. But Bob Arum originally said, the only reason why that fight didn't happen is because he didn't want to get to 140. Well, we know that's nonsense because for years, Manny Pacquiao has been a small welterweight. His speed and skill and his A level has made him, and his power has made him viable, for the weight class clearly. But we know he always has to eat more to make the weight and to keep the weight on, and 140 is definitely a better weight for him. So when he says, well, Manny didn't want to make that weight for Crawford, that's nonsense too. And it doesn't even really sound like there was an official offer that Crawford got with money. Usually Bob Arum just lays out the money in the opponent and says, here we go. What do you want? So I don't know. I don't know what's next. I doubt Floyd Mayweather would go right to a Manny Pacquiao fight, though. That's just I would think he'd want to fight to return. But then again, if he's starting to spar and he's training, Sugar Ray Leonard, I'm not comparing the two just in the fact that the long layoff, obviously much longer for Leonard before Hagler, but he took a full year to do camps. I'm not saying Floyd would do camps. I doubt his body would, at this age, would hold up, and his hands, I doubt that would all hold up. But, if you're sparring and you're staying sharp and you're staying in shape, maybe he would. Maybe he would take that risk and come back and fight next May or September against Manny Pacquiao. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But, yeah, I think Pacquiao will get this done rather easily on the scorecards, but I could see it being, like I said, a competitive, stylistically a good fight where Jesse makes him earn it. At least that's what I'm hoping as a boxing fan. You know what I mean? So there is an undercard fight, Nonito Donaire versus Jesse Magdanello. Magdanelo's undefeated. He's definitely got some skills. Sometimes he gets wide with his punches. He leaves himself open. And he hasn't fought anybody to get him ready for Donaire. Now, which Donaire will show up? The guy that isn't 100% into his camp? Doesn't have that 100% focus? I don't know. Even in, I think it was a fight or two ago where he was clearly winning the fight, he got caught with the big shot, and then that turned into a competitive fight where it probably shouldn't have been. Now, maybe he just got careless or bored in the ring, and he was trying to set up this awesome, counter punch. And for a while, fundamentals were not necessarily part of his game. The counter punch and just that one big punch that would turn it all, and the athleticism and speed got Donaire by, even though he wasn't having great camps. So I think, though, if Donaire has enough left, if he's gets old overnight, like they say, maybe Magnanello, that freshness, that willingness to get the win and knowing what it will mean for his career, maybe he could, knock him out or knock him down. But at 122, this is a better weight than it was at 126. Not to say he couldn't fight some of these guys, but my mind is Bob Arum, Top Rank, moved Magnanello perfectly, where he hasn't fought anybody of note that you can say, oh, that's a hell of a win. That's a signature win. He's fought some solid guys and prospect level guys near his range, I guess you could say, or his level as a prospect. But when you look at his resume, nothing really tells you, and even his fighting, like his skill, nothing really tells you he's going to be. To me, he looks like he's going to be wide open. But I think Magnanello will push the pace. Hopefully, that's a good stylistic fight. I got Donaire winning. Like I said, if Donaire's way past his prime, or he put in camps like he had previously where they just weren't 100% focused, then he might be in some problems here. But I think Donaire, to me, I think they're moving Donaire for Oscar Valdez. You know what I mean? For that big fight. So that'll probably be what's next, or they'll build to that. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Go ahead and check out the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast anytime on iTunes. You can subscribe and download it there. Also, as well, at blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. We did have Jessie Vargas 2 weeks ago, if you want to, listen to his interview. And you can tell his fighting style and his outside persona, or his attitude, is much more aggressive. It's almost like no more Mr. Nice Guy. So maybe that mentality will lead to, even when he's getting beat, he's willing to exchange and catch something, catch that right hand, catch Manny with a big right hand. We'll see. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. You guys enjoy the fights tonight. Peace.